What's happening, people? Welcome to the brand new season of It's All Blakademik with myself, your host, Jordan Jarrett-Bryan. Thank you very much for sticking with us for 3 seasons now. We're 3 seasons deep, and we're very, very glad that you guys have continued watching and engaging in our content. If you're new to our platform, welcome. A couple of footnotes before we get into our first debate of the day. We've got a website, brand new website, which is bells, whistles, it's amazing. Go check it out. All our podcasts, all our content, videos, blogs, it's all on there, blakademik.com. All W's, blakademik.com. That's Blakademik with no C's as well. We'll probably put a graphic on the screen here so that we can really ram it into your head how we spell Blakademik. And also, thank you very much everyone that came down to our live show last week as well. We had a great turnout and 2 great debates. That content also is up on our website and across all of our socials on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Okay, so on the show this week, we're gonna have a discussion to kick off the season with a discussion around the Netflix hit series, When They See Us. It's something that I think has really resonated with a lot of the black community, both here in the UK and of course over in the US as well. And to do so, I've got 3 fantastic guests with me here today. I've got broadcaster here, Claire Clotty, one of our regulars. I've also got the author of Think Like a White Man, Nels Abbey, here too. And I'm also joined by a solicitor who specialises in criminal law here, Hamza Adesanu as well. Thanks for joining me on the show here today. So guys, let's get straight into it. I can't think of another show or a program that has resonated so much with me personally than When They See Us. Can you guys first of all think of another series, program, show that has really, invoked the emotions that this series did? I'll start with you, Claire.
Not a series. I do remember 13, and that was another one of Ava's documentaries, and that really hit me in my core, but I can't think of a series.
No. Nels, can you think of anything on television that's...
I think of things that there are some things that do that impact in a similar way. So of course there was 13th. There was the Khalif Browder story, which had a similar impact. You could go back to the 70s when you're thinking of Roots, for example, which had a very similar impact. But the base of it, or the core of it, always seemed to be that telling stories of us, telling our history, telling our truth, and really, truly show how harsh life can actually be to us 2 black people within Western societies.
Mm-hmm. Hamza, can you think of another show?
For me, it's the same as an older person. I think Roots was the first one as a youngster, especially the first time something on television showing, as you said, the black experience, difficult experiences, and being honest about what took place historically.
Do you actually remember this case? Because you're a solicitor. Do you actually remember this case, 20 odd years ago now?
I remember it. Is it more than 20 years? I think it was late 80s, perhaps. I was a youngster at the time. And it was big news here as well at the time, because I remember the word wilding that came out of it. I think it's one of those words, those sort of dog whistle words almost, like mugging, wilding, steaming, as it was in the old days as well. Words that always applied to, especially young gangs of, what they say, young black people committing criminal acts. And they put specific terms on it.
What do you remember from that time and that case when it was live and very prevalent?
I remember the general outrage amongst mainstream society. Everyone said, "Here, black kids going wild. Central Park isn't safe for white people anymore. It's black kids running rampage." And that was the overriding headline from that. And while, outside of the normal mainstream community, in the black community, we always suspected there was something not quite right about this case. At the time, we could never put our fingers on it.
Indeed. Do you guys remember the case at all? You guys are a little bit older than me, I think.
Stop it.
A little bit. Do you guys remember the case when it was live at the time?
No, I don't.
I remember it now.
I remember the aftermath of it. So I remember it's like early 2000s, late 90s or so. It became a little bit of you would hear it in rap records here and there. But in terms of the 80s, when it was on and raging, I was far too young to really understand what's happening at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. When I watched this, I watched it twice. Once initially, Claire, just to I watched it, and I didn't know about this case, but when it happened, I was a little bit too young. I was 9 at the time, so I don't remember it. I watched it just as a viewer, and then when we decided, me and my production team, to do a show on this, I watched it a second time with my work head on to kind of make notes and go through it again. But something that seems to come up from people that have seen the show is that it was a hard watch. That seems to be said by everyone that's watched it. It's a really difficult watch. Many people I know have said they are postponing watching it because they need to prepare themselves for it. Did you also find it a very difficult thing to watch? And did you need a run-up time to kind of get to it before you actually ended up watching it?
To be honest, I actually went straight in. And the reason why I went straight in was because I love Ava and I knew about the story, but I really wanted to understand what happened because I was too young to really understand what happened when it happened. I've watched the Khalif Browder story, and that hit me hard. But the difference for me with this is I could feel what a sister would feel. I could feel what a mother would feel. I could also see the dynamics that take place in the community. The Black experience isn't one experience. I could see the family who were affluent. I could see the family who weren't as affluent, who had loads of conflict and, poverty and things going on. And I could really feel everyone's story. It wasn't just about these young men. It was about how our community interacts and what happens when a crisis like this or a trauma like this happens in the community. So,
Nels, what was the main emotion that you felt? I mean, I suppose anger would be a given, but that aside, what was the next main emotion that you felt when watching this series?
As you pointed out, anger really did was at the top of my agenda, but also I felt immense sorrow for the young men and their families and for everybody else too, because I felt sorrow, and also I felt a degree of fear, because as much as we like to think that these things are in the past, there's somebody who's going to be telling almost verbatim the exact same story in the future, who could probably say the exact same thing or even worse today. Eric Garner went through worse than what those guys actually did. He didn't see the other side of it, so the chokehold, he was out. And we're persistently seeing it, Philando Castile, even a Mark Duggan, for example. So we have these things, we have these experiences, we have these stories, and I often I don't like to be comforted I don't want to lull myself into a false sense of security or comfort in believing that this is something that happened in the past and it's not happening today and I'm safe from it or my children are safe from it. I know that's not the case.
Well, what's been the response, I'll stick with you, Nels, from any white people who have seen this series? Have they shared with you their thoughts on whether they knew of the case or not? Have they shared their thoughts on what they took away from this series?
So it's a very good question, because the first night I was watching with a couple of white people, and it's just like after dinner or so, we put it on. We just thought, let's see this. We've heard a lot about it or so, and I thought, yep, this is good. And it reached one point where about halfway through the first episode, a friend of mine just got up and just said, "I can't do it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. That I can't. This is too much for me right now." And it was quite literally, she was already in tears. That it had already been to a point where she just felt like this is something that's going to be too burdensome to see. So eventually she went away and watched it by herself, and we had a long conversation about it. And what I said in my last point about, hey, let's not lull ourselves into a false sense of security or comfort or celebrate the fact that it's in the past, that this is happening today. So I have seen white discussions, or I have been in the midst of white people who are discussing it, people who are fairly liberal or actually fair-minded people, and their responses to it was similar to ours too. It was similar to what Claire mentioned and what you mentioned too. It was similar to how we feel about it. It's a sense of anger, fear, and also to reality of the fact that the person who really put the bounty on them, Donald Trump, is now the most powerful man in the world too. So it's something we can't separate then from now, because it would be naive to do so.
Claire, when the Raheem Sterling, the England and Manchester City footballer, suffered racist abuse at a game last season against Chelsea, I work in the football industry. There was a lot of white journalists and white media outraged that, where's this come from? We thought this had gone. And that was a frustration for me and many of my black colleagues, that this had never gone away. Do you think there's a similar sense with this, that a lot of white people who were emotionally affected by this, does it anger you that many of them feel like, I didn't know this was going on, or I thought that this wasn't the way it was? Does that anger you at all?
I wouldn't say it angers me. I will say that common sense isn't common, and it does surprise me. So I wouldn't say anger me, but it surprises me sometimes that people can't see what's in black and white. But I also think, instead of dwelling on that, what can I do to help alleviate that? And where you've done an amazing thing watching it with white people. I think a lot of us as black people watch things in isolation and we deal with it in isolation. I think there's an opportunity to sit with our peers, our friends, and watch it together and have that conversation. What we're going to do with it on our own, we're going to strategize alone, but we actually need to be strategizing together to a certain degree to make sure that the conversation moves into action, purposeful action.
Hamza, one of the things that struck me watching this more than anything else was how easy it was for all of the justice system, all the cops involved, how easy it was to plant this on these boys. what in your experience are the major flaws with the American judicial system, and how far away in terms of better or worse is the UK one in terms of how it treats black boys in particular?
I'd say it's better in that it's not as severe. As much as anything else, that's the main difference. Apart from that, the punishments are less severe. There's no death penalty. That's fair enough. But I was watching it with lawyers. Speaking about it with some lawyers, and for a lot of them, it was an isolated case. What a shocking case it was. I remember having a discussion online with some lawyers on a lawyers forum. And as far as one lawyer chimed in 40 years of working as a criminal justice lawyer, I've never seen racism in the system. And again, as you said, that came as a shock to me. You've never seen racism. I think for lots of lawyers, they miss out on the small microaggressions almost, or small micro parts of the system where from every stage there's an element of racism. Statistically, you'll see that. Most lawyers will miss that and they'll say, no, things are fine here. It couldn't happen here. It's different here. We're different here. We're better here. And I think if there's that sense of, I suppose, people feel comfortable, they feel relaxed that this is different here. It's not that different. It's just at a different level and a different scale. That's all. From stop and search onwards, at every stage, you're finding different outcomes for different people. Worse for black people. Is
it as prevalent, would you say, in this country and our judicial system, where the blatantness of trying to incriminate innocent black boys, we know to some degree it happens, but I still just can't get over how blatant and how easy it was in this series. Is it a lot more subtle of how the bias towards black boys is in this country?
I think the 80s were the same here as well. Okay. You could still get away with it. Putting a bunch of black kids in the back of a van, beat them up, kick them out, and there'd be no comeback on that. I think here, as you said, the word's subtle now. You're seeing different results. You're seeing people being treated differently. It's subtle. When that lawyer said, after 40 years, I've never seen any racism, I had to think back and say, I probably haven't either. Not direct. No one's ever insulted a black person, called a black person a particular name, or done something that seemed, on the face of it, motivated by race. So you're not seeing it overtly, but there's that, it's happening.
Can I just point something out there? I remember in 2011 riots, there was one young man, but you're a solicitor, so it probably remains on your mind more so it does mine, but there was one young man who was put in the back of the police van, and he actually managed to switch on his telephone and record the conversation between him and the policeman, and the policeman actually said to him that the problem with you is that you'll always be an N-word. This was a British policeman, or police officer, so that you're an N-word and you'll always be an N-word, and it was very audible, very clear. The actual audio, you can listen to it on the Guardian website till this very day, and the policeman officer was found not guilty. Yeah. And that was that.
You see, I find that a lot with the assaults on police, especially, where police may use excessive force, and lots of lawyers don't challenge these cases, or obstruction of police. Small cases, it's not the biggest charge you'll ever face. But you'll find, we've seen on CCTV, an officer may use excessive force towards a black person, and he'll get found not guilty, and the black person may well still be convicted of an assault on police. And I defend a lot of these cases. If I've got a specialism, it may well be that. And people will say, how can you defend these cases? It's clear he's obstructed it. The officer's given his word. He said what's happened, and they'll take it on face value. And I think it's part of the problem as well. Officers expect to be taken at face value. Therefore, they'll push the boundaries. They expect that no one's going to believe this kid. And there's those sort of code words that you see a lot of barristers use in Crown Court. He'll go down well with the jury. Quotation marks, he's their kind of person. They'll like this guy. Young, poor black kid may not go down well with the jury.
Yeah. On top of that, there's things that are said and there's things that aren't said. And in the pursuit of evidence for a case, I've found in my experience, I used to be a youth offending officer, some of the cases just dragged out, and they were just, minute, in my eyes, small offences. You should be able to gather the evidence. If you haven't got it, throw the case out. But it dragged on and on. The child's education is affected. The parents' work is affected because they have to attend various meetings. Things get adjourned, and it just stretches out the process. And in the meantime, you've got a young man who's experiencing all of these inner emotions. They're isolated from their peers. They're not allowed to go to certain areas. And then they're found not guilty, but then they've got all of this trauma, and then they behave in a way as if they were guilty, and now it just has such a lasting impact. And as I said, it's not what's said, it's what's the action as well, the intention. Are we going to try and help this kid out? We know he didn't really do it. Let's make sure we get the evidence in and get rid of this case. And it doesn't happen like that.
On a human level, Claire, we can all have empathy with what it would have, or sympathy even, what it would have been like to have been a relative of any of these boys involved. But as a mum, what did you think about how the parents' roles in, from when the boys were taken. There was one mother that was very vociferous in, I want to see my son now, let me through, and she got through, And then there were...
That was me.
Would that have been you?
Yeah.
And what do you think about the parents that were a little bit less kind of on the front foot of demanding, you need to free my child or let me at least see him?
I think
I'm not putting blame on those
No,
parents,
of course not. But I think
approaches.
it's a massive learning opportunity for us to understand our rights, understand the systems. It's like if you're playing any game, you know the rules to the game. And I think this, for me, reminded me, okay, you need to do a bit more research. You need to know where you stand. And that way you have the confidence and you're able, even if you don't have the vocabulary, you can articulate yourself and you can just say, no, this can't happen. You don't have to explain it away. You know what your rights are.
And just kind of building on the point that Nels made earlier on about Trump, what does it say? I mean, we can have a discussion about Trump and what he stands for all day long, but what does it say that now the man who is the most powerful man on the planet was to some degree at the center of this, because he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, I believe, asking for the death penalty to be brought back for these boys. What does that say about America electing someone like that?
Essentially, it shows that certain people, rich white people, will get away with things much more easily. I think that's the basic lesson you can draw from this. You can make mistakes, and for some people, mistakes are punished more harshly. If he'd been a young black man in 1989 making a similar mistake, he wouldn't be here now, he wouldn't be president. If Obama had done the same thing, he'd never have made it.
Yeah. I think there's something going on. There's two things that I take from Trump and the actual letter. Number one, Donald Trump is not where he is today, despite writing that letter and publishing it in the New York Times, calling for death penalty to be brought back for them. He's there because of it, because that actually gave the signal of the certain type of person he was, and that comes from his lineage with his dad, who was also racist, and amongst other things too. Putting Donald Trump to the side, because we've covered Donald Trump, everybody's covered Donald Trump to death. But the other element of it that has to be thought of is the New York Times actually accepted the money for the adverts and not just the New York Times, several newspapers, they accepted the money for the advert and ran it with no moral qualms, no thinking about, does this place these young people in a position where they're going to get a fair trial? Or does this actually put a fair trial in some degree of jeopardy? And I think also too, when we're speaking of, and I think the loud and clear part that came out of When They See Us was the Trump element, but the more subtle part was the role that media played within criminalizing these young men, within actually making it seem that they were guilty before they were even found guilty. And that's not something that's exclusive to America, it happens over here too. If you think of, again, if we go back to say, 2011, which is a real flashpoint for this society, which wasn't really given the actual air to breathe it should have. Mark Duggan is killed by the police. Immediately, press goes to work on him. And he didn't stand a chance of any degree of empathy or any degree of sympathy or any degree of actual fair assessment of what has actually happened over here, what are the lessons to be learned. It was just, he's a bad one, that's it. And off we go from there.
And let's look for the evidence to prove that.
To prove that, as opposed to actually fine, let's look at this fairly or so. So it's not, so Trump is very loud and clear. We know we're dealing with a demagogue and what is quite clearly by any indication a racist. But as far as media is concerned too, I think media, those of us who work in media amongst everything else too, we need to look at our industries too and figure out that are we essentially facilitating the Trumps, or are we the Trumps in print or on the audio and video too at the same time?
There was there was a similar process with Stephen Lawrence when he got stabbed.
Yes,
for the first couple of weeks, it was, let's get some dirt on this boy. Let's find out what he was really up to. I heard he's a bit of a wrong one. Let's do some digging. And that was the first response. Not, this is a tragic event. Let's see how bad he was.
And that for me was very powerful again in this series. It was, kind of pertaining almost to the title, which I'll come to in a minute, but it was, well, there's a crime being committed, there were some black boys in and around it must have been the black boys, let's just pin it on them and then we'll worry about proving it afterwards, you know what I mean? Oprah Winfrey was very prominent in this production as well, but does anybody remember what her stance was back in '89 when this case kind of came about?
Enlighten us.
Well, she was very, let's say, sympathetic to the idea that maybe these boys weren't innocent. So she's almost kind of come a little bit full circle. So is there a little bit of hypocrisy from Miss Winfrey on this as well? Because she's been at the forefront of pushing that these boys got justice and they got wronged, but she wasn't pushing that narrative back in '89.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm getting really sick of people holding or not allowing people to learn, grow, make mistakes. We can't exist with not learning from our mistakes. So she may have come to a point where she realised, actually, you know what? Now I've done more research, I can see what it is. Yeah. But just because she hasn't gone on air and said, now I've done more research, actually I was wrong, people are like, right, you know, we can't value what you're contributing to this. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair.
I think it's a bit of a tough one because I often say to young people who I mentor, and amongst other things, or my young ones, I often say to them, look, principles only mean something if I stand by them when it ceases to be convenient to do so. So if I can hold Donald Trump to a particular standard for taking a particular position and leveraging his power to actually pretty much make the corner of hell that those young boys were in at the time a little bit hotter, if Oprah Winfrey, and I don't know exactly what Oprah Winfrey said, but if Oprah Winfrey did the exact same thing, it's good to see that she's atoning for it today, which Donald Trump did not do. So I think that's a clear difference. That look, if you made a mistake, it's good to see she's bringing them on a show, she's doing specials amongst other things or so. It's good to see that she's doing that. But I mean, there's other things where I see other people, black people in society today, when a black person's accused of things, the first thing they do is believe what they're accused of. And I think, again, I could mention people we've mentioned right now amongst about other cases that they're doing the exact same thing. So again, it's a learning experience for all of us, but we have to grow and learn not to believe the worst of ourselves the moment we hear it.
That's right. And I think the families, the 5 families, really illustrated that in the sense that Yusuf's mum was very standoffish with Corey's mum. She separated herself straight away, like, my kid's the good kid, your kid's the bad kid. And I think sometimes we do that as a community when they should look at it as, look, our 5 boys are innocent. From the get-go, they should have been, right, we are working together, there's strength in numbers, we're gonna sort this out. Whereas they broke off into their little tribes.
And I'm not a parent, but I totally agree that strength in numbers, and this is not about any one individual black boy, but at the time, can you maybe understand why a parent would be like, my priority first and foremost is my son? Or do you think that you have to look past that and for the greater good?
I can, but because I know so much about joint enterprise, I'm like, no, we are doing this together.
I think, so if you look at it, so Claire, you know so much about joint enterprise. You're a solicitor. I'm an author, I do other things, so you're a journalist, everything else. That we've got a vast skill set around here. If something happened like this to, say, forbid the thought, somebody in my family, I know I can call up the 3 of you and ask for these sorts of things. And we have to recognise too that us lot as a community today are standing on the shoulders of the experiences that those guys have gone through. So we now know, we're seeing from them that, hey, this is what happened at the time. Here's how the game actually works. Here's how bad things can actually get, or so. Here's how you behave yourself. But 2020, I mean, hindsight's 2020. It's easy for us to say today that, look, they should have stuck together, they were forever. There was no blueprint on how those things are actually done, how those things are done. How do you play that game? When you're going into resource poor minorities against the best and best and best of law degrees, how do you compete? What actually happens or so? So it's a good thing. They've really, we're standing on their shoulders. They've really sacrificed themselves for us, or so. I'm sure they're still struggling with PTSD till this very day. No, but it's something for them. We owe them a debt of gratitude to everybody who's been through traumatic experiences that we can learn from and make ourselves stronger as a result.
We'll come to the point in just a moment. The title, When They See Us, I'll ask all 3 of you. I'll start with you, Hamza. What does that mean to you? What do you take from that title? Why do you think they chose that title? Because I watched the Oprah show where she did with the 5 men, and she revealed that Ava was under pressure to title the series the what was it? The Innocent 5 or something like that. Exonerated 5, and they were like, no, that doesn't work for us. What do you take from the title When They See Us?
I think it goes back to that going down well with the jury. When you see a defendant, what do you see? And you'll see certain people in a certain way. You see a young black boy hoodie, for example, and you'll form a view almost instantly. And jury members will, the police will, a magistrate will. If I'm applying for bail for a young black guy in a hoodie or a rich old guy in a suit, one's more likely to get bail. These are the facts. As far as I'm concerned, these are the facts. And I think that's the way it works. It's the judgments you make at the very start. And if you see a young black boy, the judgment you make will be a negative judgment. It's as simple as that. And
do you think the perception of how they saw black boys 20 odd years ago is significantly different to how black boys are seen now?
I wouldn't say significantly, no. I mean, you still see it within the media, listen, the police stats, it's still 7-1. If you're a black boy, you've got 7 times more chance of being stopped and searched by the police. And let's bear in mind, 80% of those searches are a waste of time. Nothing was found, there was no crime committed, you were doing it for nothing. So you're stopping 7 7 times the amount of black boys for no good reason, effectively. And you're doing that and getting away with it. You know, they're compiling stats every year. We know how bad the stats are. There's a reason for this. If you say it's racism, no, they'll all deny it. Lawyers will deny it. Your client wasn't stopped because he was black. It's for some other reason. He looks suspicious. Sus laws went out in the 80s, but they're still using them.
But just to push back on that a little bit, 20 years on from then, is it not fair to say that we have now more black people in senior roles in business, in politics, in law? Is that perception the same as it was then, or do you think it's a little bit better and the perceptions are better of black boys now because we now have more black people in senior roles across society and business?
My fear is they're still seen as exceptions. There's still an overriding picture, this is what it is to be black. And the rest of it, hasn't he done well for himself? Doesn't he speak so well? Oh, look, we're educated.
He's the one.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. In my view, it's as simple as that. I don't think anyone who's successful and black that's just a normal thing. It's an exception, it's something amazing.
Yourself, you guys, what do you think of the title? What did you make of that title?
Similar to what you said. So again, when they see us, who is they, who is us? And I think to some degree, the they there also applies to us. For example, how we see ourselves. And us is clearly, we're talking about black people in this situation also. So it's the system. It's of course, it's white people to a certain degree too. It's the social order. And then when you go inside, so I think it was a very, very, if I was in the room and we're looking for the title and they came to me, I probably would have said, nah, I don't think that's the right title. But then I would have been kicking myself 6 months down the line and said that actually you had the right title to begin with, or so, that I was the idiot in the room. I think it's so powerful. It's not more, the Exonerated Survivors is a brilliant title, but when they see us, it's a statement title that what happens when the world actually looks at us, or so, what happens when you go into, as you pointed out, when you go into the system and you have to find your way, you're looking at the judge, you're looking at the jury, and they're looking back at you and you're wondering, what do they see when they see us? When they see me, and you know exactly what's going through their mind, and you then see the fruits of it in the program. I think it's a brilliant title.
And there was so many more us's. There was, the pastor's role in, trying to help save the day. There was, the individuals in the community. It was us. Yeah. This is our child, our friend's son, our next door neighbor. This is how this impacts us, not just. And I thought it was amazing.
Corey, the boy that went to the his role in this series, I think, was the most pertinent because one, he wasn't even supposed to be there. He wasn't even meant to be there. I saw the interview he did with Oprah on her show where he talks about he didn't see it as the 5 of us. He says he saw it as 4+1 because he was the one that was separated from the others. Now, they were all in horrible places, but he says at least they were together. Those 4 were together. What did you take from his journey, not only being separated, but being in the prison that he was in, which was Rikers?
It was Rikers Island,
which is known as one of the most brutal prisons in the world.
Infamous,
Corey's situation broke me. It's episode 4, I was in absolute bits for many reasons. One, he clearly had a learning difficulty. And it's so interesting when you see someone, or a black person, who seems to have a mental health issue or some kind of disability. The treatment of them is so different. The superstition from the community, that exists, and then the treatment once they get into an institution. The way they coerced him, his experience in prison. For me, he was a very attractive young boy. The way the other inmates treated him didn't surprise me. He was smaller, so it was easy to pick on him. Solitary confinement, what that does to anyone, but I just thought, oh my gosh, this is a black man who's got learning difficulties. He's now going to have severe mental health issues. He's not. His family are the least affluent from what I could see. There were other things going on, that his situation absolutely broke me. And even seeing him on the panel with Oprah, not being able to, his was powerful because he said less. Sometimes. Less is more. And I could just feel him and feel his energy. And I don't think anything can make things right for him.
Nels, what did you make of the father of...
oh, goodness,
Anton.
Yeah. His character, the man intrigued me as well because he was the one at first was like, just say you've got to say so we can get you out of here. Was that because, do you think that he had that approach because he knew let's get out of here, say we got to get out of here and we'll deal with the repercussions afterwards? Or do you think in hindsight it was better that they kept their stance that no, we haven't done this crime, keep him in there, and then what subsequently happened afterwards? His approach to what his son did and said, did you agree with it?
Okay. I did not. Sorry. So I'm reminded.
So you're catching up on
I'm just catching up. So his dad was the one who actually was played by Omar on The Wire, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I know who he's playing. Sorry. Forgive me, brothers.
No.
So what it is. I think that was a dad who didn't know the system. I think that was a dad who didn't know exactly what him and his children were up against in the slightest bit. I think that's a dad who was almost like many people who come from working class backgrounds, who go into the system probably, and you hear these terms, just trust the system. And I often say to people, the trust in the system has failed us far too many times for us to trust it. So I looked at the dad, and of course the dad lived with the regret to the moment he died, so he just didn't know what he was doing. He was too...
I disagree. Do you know why I disagree? I think he thought he knew the game because he'd been in the system, so he was trying to outsmart it. He was thinking, right, I know how this can go. So I'm going to say, I genuinely feel like he wanted to save his son. He thought, listen, it's going to be this for you. So let's try and play their game with my background experience and we'll outsmart them.
Try and negotiate
it blew up in his face.
I think you find that sometimes where people who, like you said, no trust, their starting point is no trust. This is going to go wrong, whatever happens. Let's try and minimize the damage.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that's the unfortunate thing. You see it even to this day, adults or appropriate adults at police stations, let's just get out of here. Because that's your priority. Get out of here, work out the rest later. It's going to go badly. You're going to get convicted. Don't believe in any of this. Let's just get out of here. So at least you're out of here for tonight. You can go home and have some dinner and we'll deal with a guilty plea at court.
And I think that that's something that exists in the culture. We've got those who want to toe the line. You know, nothing wrong with lawyers and doctors, but there's a mentality, look, get this kind of job, do this kind of education, and you'll be all right in life. When we know that's not true. And then there's the rebellious crew who are like, listen, do whatever you want to do. But I think that still exists, and we need to get the balance right. It's not, you're going to get this job and you're going to be okay.
But I think the system tempers that. You know, to be a lawyer, you've got to be to a degree a conformist. There's no getting away from that. You can't sit there and be a rebel. You're not going to get qualified. You're not going to get a training contract. You're not going to get pupillage. Don't be that rebel right now. And at a certain point, 40 years on, like, what have I done? I just told the line for no good reason. Yeah, I've changed nothing.
The lead prosecutor, Elizabeth Ladera, she has subsequently lost her role teaching at Columbus University, but she hasn't lost her, I believe, her ability to practice law still, as far as I'm aware. Is that the epitome of white privilege? That even with this coming out and the case being reversed, she can still, okay, she lost her job, but that's all she's lost.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is white privilege. It's the nature of being a prosecutor. Your job's to prosecute, my job's to defend, my job's to get somebody off, their job's to get somebody to go down. That's the unfortunate thing. The system's adversarial. Either you win or you lose. And if you're the prosecutor, your job isn't to sit there and think about the intricacies. Your job is to think, how do I win this case? How do I get my conviction?
But isn't the difference, though, that you can lose a case, but once it's subsequently proven that you were using foul practices to try and win that case, is that not a slight difference, or does it not really matter in that sense?
I think the system is designed to do that. Okay. I think it's unfortunate. That's what it is. There's no, let's find out the truth. Let's get to what really happened. It's about winning and losing. You do everything possible to do that.
Go on, Neil,
no, I think you know your career a lot better than I can say. But I just want to question. I think you've already answered it. Prosecuting in bad faith, someone that you know is more than likely, overwhelmingly likely to be innocent. And then you can then go ahead and... I think
it goes back to the lawyer's conundrum. Yeah. I often get asked, how do you defend people who you know are guilty? Yeah. And my job's to defend people.
There was a gentleman,
that's what I do.
But don't want to distract, but there was a gentleman who came out a couple of years ago. There was a guy, again, African-American man, who was pretty much dying of cancer at the time. And then he was a guy who did pretty much spent all of his life in prison. And he just got the lawyer, the prosecutor who prosecuted him, who was at the time in his early 20s, he just came out and said, look, what has really happened over here is that I was young, I was ambitious, I wanted to go somewhere, I was willing to say anything I wanted to say in order to get the prosecution or so, and I did so, and he was prosecuted. Really truly on the balance of probability, amongst other things, also common sense, he's actually an innocent man. And then, but so the guy's released, he's then taken to hospital, but the prosecutor asked him for forgiveness and said, can you please forgive me for what I did to you? And thankfully, the brother who was dying said, I cannot forgive you.
I've just got to wrap up. Just finally, is it just as simple now as saying that we need a more fair, representative and diverse judicial system to ensure that these sorts of crimes don't happen again?
I don't see why diversity should be the issue. Either you do right or you do wrong, and that shouldn't come down to the diversity within it.
Just need more good people.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
And what's your final takeaway from the series? What would you take away from it?
I would say that as a community, we shouldn't discriminate against each other based on class or position in the community or family dynamic. I would also say that we need to learn what our rights are, and we need to have conversations with those who don't look like us. On a regular basis and not in isolated, reflection upon situations like this, just in every day. A Mayor of London did a study and it's revealed that 35% of Londoners only hang around with people who look like them, who are from the same community of them. That's 35%, that's massive. So we need to shift that.
Guys, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on, put my teeth in. It's all Blakademik. Check out our website and also our socials. We're across Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Until next week. Peace.